Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to YouTube. Mr. Taco's math class. We're back. We're here. We're thriving. It's Monday. It's November. Yeah, we took a YouTube hiatus last week because we were doing a Get It Done week in 5th grade at Glenview. So we were reviewing some things, doing a lot of Zoom meetings, doing a lot of office hours, doing a lot of really hard work. And now we're kind of back to the new stuff, which is why we're back on YouTube with Intro to Decimals. Brand new concept for some of you. Here's what you're going to need. Something to write on, something to write with, the usuals. And then down here, there's our I cans. I'll read them out for you. I can understand that decimals are equal divisions of 1 organized in groups of 10. And I can express values with decimals in both number and word form. Let's get right into it. Couple things up front when we're talking about decimals. Before we get into the concept of decimal, I do want to review two concepts that are going to be really important here. Number one, this idea of fractions. Okay, fractions being one whole quantity divided into equal parts, right? So you've got, in this case, 1 divided into 4 fourths. Okay, and each of these fourths has the same value. It's like making change for $1 with 4 quarters. Okay, you're not going to get a quarter and a 50-cent piece and 2 dimes because that doesn't even equal 1, and they're not even. Okay, so they've got to be equal parts, equal divisions. The other thing thinking about is place value. And we use thinking about our base 10 system, meaning 10 of one place moves over 1 to the left. Okay? 1 of one thing can be divided into 10 of the next place to the right, as you can see here, with our number 111,111,111. Every place you move to the left, we're getting 10 times larger. So 1 times 10 is 10. 10 times 10 is 100. 100 times 10 is 1,000. Okay? Likewise with the inverse. When we move to the right, we are dividing by 10. Okay? 1,000 divided by 10 equals 100. 100 divided by 10 equals 10. 10 divided by 10 equals 1. Okay? Those two things together is going to give us our idea of a decimal, because once we got here, 10 divided by 10 equals 1. But what happens when we do 1 divided by 10? Should our pattern continue to hold? And in fact, it does. So let's take a look at it. So the new thing here, this dot right here, this is our decimal point. Okay? The way I wrote it, it kind of looks like decimal point. Let's connect that D there. A decimal point. Okay? And this shows, and I've got here, our decimal point is showing the line where it stops being whole numbers and starts being fractions or equal divisions of 1. Okay? So we talked about dividing by 10 as we go. Once we get to that decimal point, we're thinking about, well, what's 1 divided by 10? If I take 1, here's my 1 bar, and I divide it into 10 equal pieces, what's the value of each piece? Right? 1/10. And so on. ... Okay. Likewise with decimals. When you have 1 divided by 10, if we're following that same pattern with place value of when you move 1 place to the right, you're dividing by 10. This we have is the tenths place, the one just to the right. directly to the right of our decimal point. Okay, this tells us this place, if we have 10 of them, it makes a whole 1. Okay, so if there was a 3 here, for instance, it would be 3 tenths. If there was a 6 here, it would be 6 tenths. If it were a 9, it would be 9 tenths. Okay, so just like we have names for every one of our places, our ones, our tens, our hundreds, our thousands, our 10,000s, our 100,000s, so on till the cows come home, we have names for each of these places as well. The tenths place, we're going to focus on 2 today. The tenths place and the hundredths place. Okay, I'm actually going to go ahead and erase the rest of these places because they do exist, thousandths and 10,000ths and so on. But just for today, we're going to worry about our first 2 places on the right side of our decimal point here. Our tenths place and our hundredths place. Okay, so just like 1 divided by 10 is a tenth, right? 1/10 divided by 10. If I were to take each of these tenths over here and I were to divide them into 10 pieces, okay, what would be the value of each piece here? Right? It would be 1/100th, because if we divided each of these up into 10 equal pieces so that we're keeping them all equal, we'd end up with 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 100. So we have 100 equal pieces. So each of these equals 1/100th. You put 10 of them together, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, it makes one of our tenths. Okay, just like here, you put 10 of them together, 100th, 200th, 300th, 400th, 500th equals 10 hundredths, or 1/10. Okay? When we name these things, we want to go by whatever our place closest to the right is. So for instance, in this case, we wouldn't say, let's even make it simpler here. Let's just keep our ones here. If we had this number, okay, the way we name that, the naming convention would be 1, and we wouldn't say 1 and 9/10 and 2/100. Seems like a lot, right? Just like if it's a number like this, we don't say, well, this number is 300s and 2/10 and 1/1. We just say, this is 321. Okay? So for our decimals, we're going to use that last place it goes to. So this is 1 and 92 hundredths. That's how we would say that. Okay? Because, yes, these are tenths, but they're also 10 hundredths. So we can think about 9 tenths or 90 hundredths plus 2 hundredths equals 92 hundredths. Okay, when we're dealing with money, right? $1.92, because there's 100 cents in a dollar. Each penny is 1/100th of a dollar. We don't say $1 and 9 dimes and 2 pennies, right? We say $1.92. We group them all together. Okay, so let's do a couple of practice ones here. If we had, let's say we had this number. Let me put my decimal point back. Okay, what would you name this number? Yeah, this would be 3 and 63 hundredths, because we've got some hundredths in the hundredths place. If we had, let's say this, we didn't have any hundredths. We just had tenths, right? $3.60. Okay. In this case, actually, we don't actually need the 0 because there's nothing else to the right of it. It's just like we don't need, technically, there's a bunch of zeros here to the left of our 3. but we don't need them because they're not holding the place for anything. Same thing with to the right of the decimal point. Okay, if we just have 6 here, we can just say 3 and 6/10. Okay, but adding some hundredths means then we'd have 3 and 61 hundredths. Okay, a little bit tricky, but we'll keep working on it. What about here? This one always seems to trip up people. What would we call this quantity, this value? Our whole number is 4. And then we have 5 hundredths. Okay? We don't have any full tens. Okay, but just like in a whole number, like if we had the number 305, right? We couldn't just leave the tens place blank because that changes the value. So if we have hundredths but we don't have any tenths, we have to put a 0 in the tenths place to show that there's some sort of, show that there's a placeholder there. Because 4 and 5/10 is a much different value than 4 and 5 hundredths. Let's go to our digital whiteboard and try a few more. Ta-da! There we are. I'm trying the light colored pen on the black whiteboard. And I want to know if that is easier to see or harder to see than the dark pen on the white whiteboard. So if we had something like, see if you can write out a couple of these. Let's try this. What would this look like in word form? And I'm going to put start a vocabulary list for us here. So here's how you spell tenths. It's just the word 10 with a THS at the end. And then same thing with hundredths. So here's 100 and then a THS at the end. Hundredths. Can be challenging to say. Make sure to really push out the hundredths, tenths. Okay, so here's our whole number. We would say this is 2 and let's look at the number to the right. What number is that? That's 41. Hundredths, because it ends in the hundredths place. A little sloppy, but there you go. 2 and 41 hundredths. Okay, I'm going to shrink this a little bit so we can see the whole thing. There we go. Even a little better, even a little smaller. There we go. Oh, look at that. We did it. Okay. Essentially for these naming conventions, start with the whole number. Here's our whole number. And then look to the right of your decimal point. What number do you see? In this case, we see a 41. And then what is the sort of last place that you find? Here's our tenths place. Here's our hundredths place. Since it goes all the way to the hundredths, we're going to call them all hundredths. So 2 and 41 hundredths. Let me do a couple more examples for you using this pattern. So if we had something like this, start with our whole number. What's our whole number? 6. And then what number do we see to the right of the decimal point? 82. And since we have a tenths place and a hundredths place, we're going to call it all 82 hundredths. Let's look at one that looks like this. Oops. That's not a decimal point, that's a comma. There we go. We have, you might call it 8.4, right? Or, what's our whole number first? 8. And what's our number to the right of the decimal point? 4. Now, with this one, do we have a hundredths place? No, we don't. We've just got the one number to the right, and our place directly to the right of our decimal point is the tenths place. So we would say 8 and 4 tenths. Okay. To give you a little bit of a contrast here, what would 8 and 4 hundredths look like? This can be the trickier ones. 8 and 4 hundredths. If 8 and 4 tenths looks like this, what would 8 and 4 hundredths look like? We'd have our 8. And because we have 4 hundredths, we know we need 2 places, right? We need to go to the hundredths place with our 4. And then in the tenths place, that means there's a 0 as our placeholder. Okay, if we were to extend it, 8 and 4 thousandths might look like to go all the way there. But we don't need to get there yet. Let's just focus on the tenths and the hundredths today. We'll get to the thousandths and beyond later. Okay? Checking the chat for any questions. Great. All right. Nice in the chat. Yep, 8.04 or 8 and 4 hundredths. Lovely. All right. Our exit ticket today focuses on kind of filling in the blank and matching up our word form. Here's our word form over here. I'm going to circle it in green. These are called word forms, writing it out like in words. And then here's our sort of number form or our decimal form here. Okay. And our exit ticket is going to be about sort of matching those up and filling in some blanks to a table. You're going to have word form on one side, number form on the other side, and then whatever's missing, then you've got to fill it in. All right, thank you for tuning in, everybody. Good luck on the exit ticket. Try it on your own, and in about 10 minutes, or 11 o'clock if you're watching this a little bit delayed, the Zoom room will be open for feedback and questions if you would like to drop in. You can also drop in and work on, say, Mr. Taco, I want to work on fractions, or Mr. Taco, I want to work on multiplication. Drop in, I'll throw you some problems, all right? Sounds good. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. Take care. Good luck on the exit ticket. We will see you back here tomorrow at 10:30, same time, same place, for a little bit of comparing fractions, or excuse me, comparing decimals. All right? Cheers.